astronauts out there now. They went to the moon and back, and the computing power in the average smartphone is better than what they had in the command module. So hello, I mean, that's amazing. It takes balls and a special type of person to do that.
Yeah. If people want to know more or be kept up to date, or where can people go to learn more? Or
well, first of all, astronomy in general. If you're in South Africa, talk to Alan. and if there is a local astronomy club wherever you are, have a look and speak to them. Usually these people are very friendly, and especially if you're new to the hobby, go there and you get a helping hand, especially if you consider buying telescope. It's always good if you have someone who's experienced to help you to avoid these initial mistakes and buying something wrong and then being disappointed and starting the hobby the wrong way. If you're interested in OSIRIS-REx, have a look at the mission website. I mentioned it earlier. It's www.asteroidmission.org. And there's plenty of information on there, inclusive mission overviews, what the spacecraft looks like, key dates of the mission, and of course news updates when something new happens. So as I mentioned, August is sort of a key milestone this year when the spacecraft arrives at the asteroid. Definitely have a look there. And NASA website, nasa.org, good sort of entry point in having a look around what's going on out there. And if anyone is interested in talking to me, if you're in Australia, but anywhere really, I'd say I give my contact details to Alan. So if someone's interested, contact Alan, and I'd be more than happy to chat and take it from there.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. It's been great chatting to you.
Absolute pleasure.
Last episode, we talked about the power source that makes stars shine, nuclear fusion. I explained how, thanks to gravity and the gas laws, contracting clouds of gas will get hotter and denser at their cores until the temperature and pressure are high enough that naked hydrogen atoms, which are really just individual protons, will overcome their enormous dislike of each other and collide, resulting in a deuterium nucleus, which is made from one proton and one neutron. And we glossed over how the presence of a neutron makes a proton much easier to approach, so that collisions between these deuterium nuclei are a whole huge amount less unlikely to happen. And we talked about how this leads to various sequences of possible reactions that result in the formation of helium in the core of every star, and that this is not only what provides the enormous amounts of energy needed to fight off the relentless crush of gravity, but also what creates enough extra energy to warm up the rest of the gas and make stars as bright and hot as they are. But that was a bit of a simplification. The thing is, as I hinted at in the first part of the series, it's all a little bit unpredictable just how much gas is going to be available to make your star in the first place. So some stars are relatively small, while others are absurdly huge. And it turns out that the amount of gas that goes into a star, its mass, is probably the most important variable in predicting what type of star you're going to get. So since this is going to be a short bit, let's talk through the possibilities as we currently understand them. Previously, we talked about how a collapsing core of gas in one of these big clouds might run out of material and end up nothing more than a warm, dense sphere of gas and dust, compressed at the center into liquids and solids. A planet, basically. But if it's big enough, in the neighborhood of our own Jupiter, then the core temperature and pressure can get quite high. Almost hot enough to begin nuclear reactions, but not quite. Where does the energy come from? Well, it's simply all the kinetic energy of the gas falling inwards, ramming into the gas that's already there and compressing it. And as per those gas laws I keep harping on about, that gives you heat so that they shine dimly in infrared. And since it's big, It takes a very, very long time for that heat to radiate out into space, and so it'll stay hot for billions and billions of years. But if it's a bit bigger, anything more than 13 times the size of Jupiter, then we enter the zone where nuclear can begin. Deuterium fusion. See, earlier we talked about hydrogen atoms fusing to make deuterium, but the thing is that some deuterium already exists naturally. Any volume of hydrogen gas is going to contain a mix of the various isotopes of hydrogen, which include deuterium. And you'll remember that while the proton-proton collisions are rare and hard to force, deuterium reactions are relatively easy. So the deuterium that's already naturally inside the core actually starts fusing at much lower temperatures and pressures than the proton-proton reaction. This object, this core of gas inside a larger cloud, isn't massive enough to reach the high temperatures and pressures needed for standard hydrogen fusion, which means that there is no source of deuterium, but it is big enough to fuse the deuterium that was already there. So we're kind of in a grey zone between planet and star, and we call this object a brown dwarf. Because there's such a limited supply of fuel, they typically last less than 1 billion years, sometimes only for a few million. And when the deuterium fuel runs out, they just stop. Game over. Brown dwarfs are generally hot, but not as hot as stars. Not hot enough to glow in visible light. Their surface temperatures are all below 1,000 degrees Celsius. Now, if our starting cloud was bigger, we get a hotter, more massive star. You get a core that can sustain true fusion, combining protons to make deuterium, as in the nuclear reactions that we talked about last episode. As this star burns, generating heat in its core, it starts to form convection currents that with cooler material close to the surface falling in and the hotter stuff rising. So as the hydrogen gradually gets converted into helium, the entire star slowly churns, stirring and mixing. The helium ash spreads out, and fresh hydrogen is constantly brought into the hot core to keep the reactions going. These stars are small. They have surface temperatures between 2 and 4,000 kelvins and last for a very, very long time. According to theory, they should keep going for trillions of years, but since that's almost 100 times older than the universe, nobody's ever watched one for long enough to confirm this. These stars are called red dwarfs. They're as close to eternal as you can get, and they are by far the most common type of star in the universe. Probably about 80% of all stars in our own Milky Way galaxy are red dwarfs. Right, now, make that cloud even bigger. You end up with a core that's hotter and more massive with a much larger volume of material around it. Unlike in a red dwarf, however, there is an area between the convection zone and the core called the radiative zone. It's called this because the heat moves through it directly by means of radiation. It's photons traveling, carrying the energy. There is no convection. That only happens further out towards the surface in the convection zone, and that means that the gas, or rather the plasma, doesn't move. No movement means helium can't leave the core and fresh hydrogen can't enter. So unlike the red dwarf, which constantly cycles material in and out of the core, we now have a star with nothing moving in or out of the core. The hydrogen that's there slowly burns into helium and is not replaced. Eventually, the hydrogen runs out. These stars have a lifespan measured in billions of years, not trillions. And so if we look widely enough, we can see examples of all stages of these stars' lives, which has turned out to be very helpful in understanding how they are born, how they grow, age, and die. These stars are called yellow dwarfs, and our own sun is a fairly typical example. Unlike red dwarfs and brown dwarfs, they don't stop burning when they run out of hydrogen. They switch fuels and metamorphosize into something much bigger and fiercer. You get bigger stars, of course, which shine hotter and burn faster and only live for a few tens of millions of years and live far more exotic, if shorter, lives before exploding as supernovae and leaving behind a neutron star or even a black hole. Naturally, these are the ones that we're most interested in. But I'm going to stop now and leave that story for the next episode. I mentioned last episode that I was taking on the role of director of the citizen science section of the Astronomical Society of South Africa. Well, as of the most recent meeting of the Committee of ASA, this post is now official, so I can now get to work. One of my first acts as director will be to try and build relationships between ASA members and other societies involved in citizen science around the world, as well as the teams behind citizen science projects. And if you're an ASA member or are considering joining up and are involved in citizen science or thinking about it, please visit the ASA website at http://assa.saao.ac.za and find the page for the citizen science section. The page is still under construction as I record this, but it will soon have some information for you along with contact details. Our goal is to support you in any form of amateur science, whether it's traditional amateur science like observing variable stars or the sorts of modern work that are what we normally think of as citizen science, like Galaxy Zoo or Moon Mappers or what have you. And of course, we want to recognize your contribution above what you're already getting from the projects themselves. Now, on the flip side, I'd like your support in return. The annual ScopeX exhibition is coming up soon in September. As always, it'll be held at the Military History Museum in Johannesburg. We're still confirming details, exhibits, sponsors and speakers, so I'd recommend checking out the website at www.scopex.co.za for updates. I can confirm, however, that we are flying Robert Ormerod as our special guest speaker. Robert is an award-winning photographer from Scotland who has worked for National Geographic, Vice Magazine, The New Yorker, and many, many more. He will be presenting a talk on photographing the Northern Lights, which I'm personally quite looking forward to. Anyway, that's all we have for the show today. Thank you so much for listening, and if you enjoy the show and know anybody else who might be interested in listening, you should send them over to www.urban-astronomer.com. They will be able to play through the archives and will find the subscriber links for whatever platform they normally use for listening to podcasts. Or they can just search for Urban Astronomer on iTunes or Google Podcasts or Stitcher or pretty much any other podcast directory you can think of. If you know of one that doesn't have me listed, let me know and I'll fix it. If you would like to leave a rating or a review on any of those platforms, well, that would also be lovely and greatly appreciated. If, on the other hand, you want to offer something more concrete, well, I do have a Patreon account. I don't have a huge number of patrons on there, which is fine since my expenses are low. But if you'd like to join them, head on over to patreon.com/Urban Astronomer Podcast, or just click the Patreon link on urbanastronomer.com. If you'd like to hear more from me, besides what's on the podcast, I'm on Twitter at @UAstronomer, and we have a Facebook page at facebook.com/Urban Astronomer. And if you'd like to reach out to me, ask questions or correct mistakes that you've heard, you can mail me at podcast@urban-astronomer.com or leave a comment on the show notes page. And I guess that's it. So thanks again for listening. Don't forget to subscribe so to make sure you catch the next episode as soon as it airs. And until then, clear skies.